A rancher bought 3 young Apache women to free them, but married all 3. The sun rose slowly over the dry land of the American Southwest, painting the wide plains in soft gold. This land was hard and unforgiving. Life here was never easy, especially during those times. People survived through strength, patience, and stubborn hope. Among them lived a rancher named Thomas Hale. He was a quiet man, known more for his actions than his words. He owned a modest ranch far from the busy towns, where cattle, horses, and open sky were his daily companions. Thomas had come west years earlier after losing his family back east. Grief had followed him like a shadow, and the wide land gave him space to breathe. He did not talk much to others, but those who knew him said he was fair and honest. He paid his workers properly, never cheated in trade, and never raised his hand in anger unless it was to defend himself or another. One afternoon, Thomas rode into a nearby settlement to buy supplies. The town was louder than usual. Men stood in groups, speaking in low voices, their faces tense. Thomas noticed a wagon parked near the edge of the market, guarded by rough-looking men. Something about it felt wrong. The horses were nervous and the men laughed in a way that made his stomach tighten. As he passed by, he heard faint voices coming from the wagon. They were soft and fearful. Thomas slowed his horse and listened. Inside the wagon sat 3 young Apache women. Their hands were not tied, but their eyes told a story of fear and exhaustion. They were not there by choice. Thomas had seen enough of the world to know exactly what was happening. This was not unusual for that time, but it never sat right with him. Conflicts between settlers and tribes had torn families apart. Many people took advantage of the chaos, treating human lives as something to be traded. Thomas had always avoided these matters, believing one man could not change a cruel system. But that day, something shifted inside him. He went about his business first, though his mind stayed with the wagon. He bought flour, tools, and medicine, but his hands moved slowly. His thoughts were heavy. He remembered his own losses, the helplessness he had once felt. By the time he finished, the wagon was still there. Thomas approached the men guarding it. He did not accuse or threaten. He simply asked questions, calm and steady. The men smirked and answered with pride, speaking of profit and opportunity. Their words made Thomas feel sick. He knew arguing would do nothing. These men only understood money. After a long pause, Thomas asked how much they wanted. The men laughed, surprised, but quickly named a price. It was high, higher than Thomas had expected. It would cost him a large part of his savings, money he had worked years to earn. The men assumed he wanted the women for himself, and their smiles turned darker. Thomas did not explain himself. He simply nodded and said he would pay. The exchange happened quickly. Coins changed hands. Papers were signed, though Thomas barely looked at them. When it was done, the men rode off, satisfied, without another glance back. The market noise returned as if nothing unusual had happened. The 3 women remained in the wagon, staring at Thomas with confusion and fear. He stepped closer but kept his distance. He spoke slowly, using simple words and gentle gestures. He told them they were no longer under anyone's control. He said he had bought their freedom, not them. He promised they were safe. They did not answer. Their faces showed disbelief. Promises had likely been made to them before and broken just as easily. Thomas understood that trust could not be demanded. It had to be earned. He offered them water and food and asked if they wished to return to their people. One of them, the oldest, finally spoke. Her voice was quiet but steady. She explained that returning was not simple. Their village had been destroyed. Their families were scattered or gone. The land was full of danger. Thomas listened without interrupting. Each word weighed heavily on him. He realized that freedom, while precious, did not magically erase fear or hardship. Letting them go without a safe place would be no kindness at all. He made them another offer. They could come to his ranch. There they would have food, shelter, and time to decide their future. He made it clear they were not prisoners. They could leave whenever they wished. There would be no debt, no obligation. Still, they hesitated. The world had taught them caution, yet something in Thomas's voice felt different. He did not speak like a man who expected obedience. He spoke like someone who respected choice. As the sun began to set, the women agreed to go with him for now. The journey to the ranch was quiet. They rode in a second wagon Thomas borrowed from a trader. He rode ahead, never once turning back to watch them. He wanted them to feel unobserved, unpressured. The road stretched long and empty, and the silence was filled with unspoken thoughts. When they arrived, the ranch appeared simple but solid. A small house, a barn, and open land surrounded by fences. No guards, no locked doors, just space and sky. Thomas showed them where they could rest. He pointed out food supplies and blankets. He told them he would sleep in the barn that night so they could feel safe inside the house. His actions surprised them more than his words. That night, as the wind moved softly across the land, Thomas lay awake, staring at the wooden beams above him. He wondered if he had done the right thing. Buying their freedom had felt necessary, but now he carried responsibility he had not expected. He knew the world would judge him harshly if they learned the truth. People would assume the worst. Inside the house, the three women sat together, whispering in their language. They did not know what the future held. They only knew that for the first time in a long while, no one had shouted at them, threatened them, or demanded anything in return. As darkness deepened, all four lay awake under the same wide sky, each trapped in their own thoughts. None of them knew that this single decision, made in a dusty market under a burning sun, would change all of their lives forever. Morning came quietly to the ranch. The sun rose slowly, and soft light filled the open land. Birds called from the fence posts, and the horses shifted in their pens. It felt like any other day, yet everything had changed. Thomas woke early in the barn. He washed his face at the water pump and took a long breath. His body felt heavy, not from work, but from thought. He knew trust was fragile, especially for people who had been hurt before. Today, his actions would matter more than any promise he could make. Inside the house, the three women were already awake. They had barely slept. Every sound during the night had made them tense. Still, nothing bad had happened. No one had entered the room. No orders had been shouted. That alone felt strange. When Thomas approached the house, he knocked gently on the door frame before stepping inside. He kept his eyes lowered and his voice calm. He asked if they were hungry. One of the women nodded slightly. Another kept her arms crossed, watching him carefully. Thomas prepared a simple breakfast. He placed the food on the table and stepped back, giving them space. He sat near the door, not at the head of the table. Small things like this mattered. He wanted them to see that he was not claiming control. They ate quietly. The youngest woman watched every move Thomas made. The oldest spoke softly to the others in their language. Thomas understood none of the words, but he respected the moment. After breakfast, Thomas explained the ranch rules as simply as he could. There were very few. Everyone worked according to their ability. No one was forced. Anyone could leave. He told them where the tools were and where the water was drawn. He showed them the boundaries of the land but made it clear they were not fences to trap them, only markers for the cattle. The women listened, still unsure. Freedom, after fear, felt confusing. It did not come with clear instructions. As the day passed, Thomas returned to his usual work. He repaired a broken fence and checked the cattle. He did not assign tasks to the women or ask them to help. He let them decide. For hours, they remained near the house, watching him from a distance. Slowly, curiosity replaced some of their fear. They saw that he worked hard, sweating under the sun like any other man. He spoke gently to the animals and treated them with care. By midday, the middle woman stepped outside and began sweeping the porch. No one had asked her to do it. Thomas noticed but said nothing. Later, the youngest followed, carrying water from the pump. The oldest remained inside, watching everything. When the sun reached its highest point, Thomas returned to the house and offered water again. He thanked them for their help, his voice sincere but not overdone. Gratitude, he believed, should never sound like ownership. That afternoon, a rider appeared in the distance. The women froze when they saw him. Fear returned to their eyes. Thomas noticed immediately. He walked toward the rider, placing himself between the ranch and the women without making it obvious. The rider was a neighbor, curious and sharp-eyed. He asked questions about the newcomers. Thomas answered carefully, saying only that they were guests and under his protection. The neighbor raised an eyebrow but said nothing more. After a short conversation, he rode away. The women had watched the exchange from afar. When Thomas returned, the oldest woman spoke again. She asked in broken English if more men would come. Thomas answered honestly. He said some people might be curious, but no one would be allowed to harm them. He promised to stand between them and danger as long as they stayed. Promises were easy to say, but his earlier actions had already given his words weight. As days passed, a routine began to form. The women chose to help with cooking, cleaning, and caring for the animals. Thomas accepted their help but never demanded more. He paid attention to their comfort, noticing which tasks they preferred and which they avoided. Slowly, small conversations began. Words were exchanged, then smiles, then quiet laughter over simple mistakes in language. Thomas learned their names and made an effort to say them correctly. That effort did not go unnoticed. At night, they sat near the fire. Thomas told stories of the land, of storms and droughts, of seasons that tested patience. The women shared pieces of their past, not everything, but enough to be understood. Loss lived in all of them. One evening, Thomas repeated his offer. If they wished to leave, he would help them find a safe place. He would provide supplies and guide them as far as he could. The oldest woman listened carefully. Then she shook her head. She said the world beyond the ranch still felt dangerous. For now, this place felt calm. Thomas accepted their answer without relief or disappointment. Choice mattered most. As weeks passed, trust grew quietly like grass after rain. It was not dramatic. It did not rush. It simply existed, built from shared meals, shared work, and shared silence. Thomas noticed changes in himself too. The ranch no longer felt empty. Laughter echoed across the land and stories filled the evenings. He felt less alone, though he did not yet understand what this new connection meant. One night, a storm swept across the plains. Thunder rolled and rain beat against the roof. The women gathered together, memories of past dangers returning with the noise. Thomas stayed nearby, lighting extra lamps and speaking softly. He did not touch them or try to comfort them physically. His presence alone was enough. When the storm passed, the air felt clean. The land smelled fresh. Something unspoken had shifted. Fear had not disappeared, but it had loosened its grip. None of them could see the future yet. They only knew that trust, once broken, could still be rebuilt. Slowly, carefully, one honest day at a time. Life on the ranch slowly changed as the weeks turned into months. What once felt like a temporary shelter began to feel more like a shared space. No one spoke of long-term plans, yet each day added another quiet layer of connection between Thomas and the three women. The morning started early. The sun would rise and work would begin naturally. Thomas still handled the heavier tasks, riding out to check cattle, repairing fences, and dealing with traders who passed through the area. The women chose their roles themselves. Sometimes they cooked, sometimes they tended the garden, and sometimes they helped with the animals. No one kept score. No one ordered anyone else around. At first, communication was slow and awkward. Words were limited and meanings were often guessed, but patience filled the gaps. Thomas listened more than he spoke. When he did speak, he chose his words carefully. He never raised his voice, even when things went wrong. One afternoon, a calf escaped through a loose fence and ran across the open land. The youngest woman noticed first and pointed. Without thinking, Thomas and the middle woman ran together, moving as one without any instruction. They managed to guide the animal back safely. When it was done, they looked at each other and laughed, surprised by the moment. It was the first time laughter came easily without fear following it. The oldest woman watched moments like these closely. She was observant and thoughtful, often quiet, but her silence carried weight. She asked questions when something mattered. She paid attention to how Thomas treated others, not just how he treated them. Over time, she noticed that his kindness did not change depending on who was watching. Thomas also learned from them. He learned how they respected the land, how they used nothing without purpose, and how they found meaning in small, everyday acts. Evenings often ended with shared meals and quiet talk near the fire. Stories were told slowly, sometimes with pauses for missing words or careful explanations. Each woman formed her own connection with Thomas, and each bond was different. With the youngest, there was lightness. She asked many questions and laughed easily. She was curious about the world beyond the ranch and enjoyed learning new things. With the middle woman, there was shared effort. She liked working beside Thomas, fixing things, learning skills, and feeling capable again. With the oldest, there was understanding. Long conversations happened between them, sometimes without many words at all. None of these connections felt rushed. There were no sudden promises or dramatic moments. Everything grew from time and shared experience. Still, not everything was easy. The outside world did not disappear. Traders and neighbors came and went. Some looked at the women with curiosity, others with judgment. Thomas noticed it all. He made sure no one stayed longer than necessary. He never allowed disrespect, even when it cost him business. One day, a group of men passed through, speaking openly and carelessly. Their words made the women uncomfortable. Thomas ended the conversation quickly and sent them away. That night, he apologized to the women, not for something he had done, but for what the world still was. The oldest woman surprised him by thanking him. She said safety did not mean danger never came. It meant someone stood up when it did. That moment stayed with Thomas. As time passed, feelings grew deeper, though no one named them yet. There were moments of silence that felt full instead of empty. Moments where concern showed without words. When Thomas was injured slightly during a fence repair, all three women cared for him in different ways. One bringing water, one cleaning the wound, one staying close until he rested. Thomas realized then that he was no longer just protecting them. They were protecting him too in their own way. One evening, as the sun set in deep orange light, the oldest woman spoke about choice. She explained that staying was no longer about fear of the outside world. It was about wanting to be there. The other two agreed. They spoke carefully, but their meaning was clear. Thomas felt a mix of warmth and fear. He valued their presence deeply, but he worried about crossing lines. He told them again that they owed him nothing. That staying should never feel like a debt. The middle woman answered softly. She said trust was not a debt. It was a gift, and gifts were given freely. From that day on, something shifted. The air felt different, lighter, but also more serious. Respect remained the foundation, but affection began to show in small ways. A shared look, a gentle smile, a longer pause before parting at night. Thomas struggled privately. He knew the world would not understand what was happening. He feared being judged, feared causing harm without meaning to. He spent long nights thinking, questioning himself, checking his intentions again and again. The women noticed his distance and addressed it directly. They spoke honestly, each in her own way. They said they felt safe. They felt seen. They felt valued not as burdens or possessions, but as people. That honesty mattered more than anything else. By the end of that season, the ranch no longer felt like a place of rescue. It felt like a place of shared life. No one had planned it that way. It had grown naturally, shaped by choice, patience, and respect. None of them knew where this path would lead. But they all knew one thing clearly now. What bound them together was not fear or obligation, but trust, and trust, once earned, was stronger than any chain. The season slowly changed, and with it came new questions. The land turned cooler at night, and the days felt shorter. Change was in the air, quiet but steady. What had once felt uncertain now felt familiar, and that familiarity made everyone pause and think. One morning, a small group of travelers passed near the ranch. Among them was an older Apache man who recognized the women. Word spread quickly. By evening, a message reached Thomas through a trader. There were people willing to guide the women back toward lands where their relatives might be found. It would not be easy, but it was possible. Thomas felt his chest tighten when he heard the news. This was what he had promised from the very beginning, a real chance, a path forward that did not include him. He did not delay. That night, he sat with the women near the fire and explained everything carefully. He did not hide his feelings, but he did not push them either. He said help was available if they wished to go. He would provide supplies, horses, and guidance as far as he could. He would not stand in their way. The fire cracked softly as silence followed. The women looked at one another. This was not a choice they had expected to face so soon, yet they had always known it might come. The youngest woman spoke first. She said the idea of returning frightened her. Too much had been lost. Too many memories were tied to pain. She had begun to imagine a future that did not feel like running. The middle woman said she needed time to think. She wanted to walk the land, feel the wind, and listen to her own thoughts. Thomas nodded and told her to take all the time she needed. The oldest woman said nothing at first. Her eyes stayed on the fire. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady. She said freedom meant choosing where to stand, not just where to run. She asked Thomas for a few days. Thomas agreed. Inside, his thoughts were heavy. He had grown attached, more than he had realized. But he reminded himself that care did not mean holding on. Real care meant letting go if that was what they chose. Over the next few days, the ranch felt different. No one avoided one another, but there was a quiet seriousness in every interaction. The women walked the land, talked among themselves, and spent long hours in thought. Thomas kept busy, giving them space without pulling away completely. One afternoon, the middle woman joined Thomas as he fixed a gate. She worked beside him in silence for a long time. Finally, she said she had remembered who she was before everything was taken. Not just fear, not just survival. She said that on the ranch she had felt capable again, useful, respected. She did not want to lose that. Thomas listened, saying nothing. That evening, the youngest woman spoke next. She said the ranch had given her something she had not known she needed, peace. Not happiness all the time, but calm. She said she wanted to stay where her heart felt steady. Still, Thomas waited for the oldest woman. He knew her decision would carry weight. On the fourth night, she asked him to walk with her. They moved slowly across the land as the sky darkened. She spoke carefully, choosing each word with care. She said she had spent her life protecting others, making choices for survival. This time, she wanted to choose for herself. She told Thomas that staying was not about fear of the outside world. It was about trust. Trust in the life they had built together. Trust in him. She said she stayed because she wanted to, not because she had nowhere else to go. Thomas stopped walking. He looked at her with concern and respect. He told her he needed to be certain. He said the world would judge harshly. He said he never wanted their choice to be questioned or doubted. She met his eyes and said choice spoken clearly did not weaken under judgment. The next morning, all three women spoke together. They told Thomas their decision. They would stay, not as guests waiting for rescue, not as people being protected, but as equal partners in the life they were already living. Thomas felt relief, fear, and responsibility all at once. He did not celebrate. He did not speak grand words. He simply accepted their choice with honesty and care. But the outside world did not remain silent. News traveled fast and opinions followed. Neighbors questioned Thomas's intentions. Some warned him, others turned away. Trade became harder, conversations shorter. Thomas faced it all quietly. He did not defend himself loudly. He let his actions speak. He made it clear that the women spoke for themselves. He did not explain their decisions for them. One day, a man from the settlement confronted him openly. He accused Thomas of control, of wrongdoing, of crossing lines that should not be crossed. Thomas did not raise his voice. He said the women were free, had always been free, and could leave that very day if they wished. The women stood beside him and confirmed his words, calmly, clearly, without fear. That moment changed something. Not everyone was convinced, but doubt began to soften. Life continued. Work was done. Meals were shared. Laughter returned slowly. The tension did not disappear, but it no longer ruled the space between them. Thomas began to understand that this was not a story of rescue. It was a story of choice. Of people meeting each other with honesty, patience, and respect in a world that often lacked all three. As winter approached, they prepared together. Food was stored. Repairs were made. Plans were discussed openly. Nothing was hidden. Nothing was assumed. The future was still uncertain, but uncertainty no longer felt like danger. It felt like possibility. And for the first time since that dusty market day, all four of them looked ahead without fear, knowing that whatever came next would be faced together by choice, not by force. Winter had passed, and the land began to breathe again under the warmth of spring. The ranch, once quiet and solitary, now felt alive with purpose. Thomas moved through the fields with a sense of calm he had not known in years, though the responsibility he carried was heavier than ever. The women had chosen to stay, and that choice had changed everything. It was not about ownership or obligation. It was about trust, respect, and shared life. Life on the ranch was no longer just survival. It was living fully, in small steps that mattered deeply. The youngest woman had grown comfortable with the land. She moved easily among the animals, feeding them and checking the fences with a confidence that surprised even her. Her laughter, once rare and cautious, now rang freely across the open fields. It was a sound that brought Thomas a quiet joy, a reminder that people could heal even after great hardship. The middle woman had taken a special interest in repairing and maintaining the ranch buildings. She learned quickly, hammering nails and mending broken fences with skill. She and Thomas often worked side by side, moving in quiet coordination. Words were not always needed. Understanding came from shared effort. Thomas noticed the pride she took in her work and encouraged it, never making her feel less capable than anyone else. The oldest woman continued to watch and listen. Her strength was quiet, the kind that rooted the household. She offered guidance when asked and insight when situations became complicated. Her presence brought a sense of balance to the ranch. Thomas realized that her wisdom, combined with the vitality of the younger women, created a rhythm that made life smoother, safer, and more meaningful. Despite the growing peace, Thomas knew the world outside could be harsh and judgmental. News of their arrangement had spread slowly, and some neighbors disapproved. Gossip reached the settlement that a rancher had kept 3 Apache women. Some were curious, others critical. Thomas faced whispers and pointed questions. But the women themselves had made their choice clearly, and that clarity was his shield. He did not defend them for them. They spoke for themselves, proud and articulate in their decisions. There were quiet challenges, too. Life in close quarters was not without tension. Differences in opinion arose over chores, the care of the animals, and how to manage the land. But instead of conflict, these moments became opportunities for dialogue. Thomas encouraged honesty and compromise. Over time, disagreements were resolved through conversation rather than authority. This practice strengthened their bonds, teaching all 4 that respect could carry as much weight as any rule or fence. As the seasons passed, the women's choice to stay became clearer in every action. They tended to the garden, planting seeds, watering plants, and harvesting vegetables. They prepared meals with care, making sure everyone had enough and that food was shared fairly. They learned new skills, and Thomas learned from them, discovering ways to improve the ranch he had never considered. It was a partnership built on mutual respect and quiet understanding. Thomas began to feel something new, affection deeper than companionship but rooted in respect and patience. He did not rush it. He did not speak of it immediately. Instead, he let it grow naturally, shown in small acts, offering the best horse for the work, carrying a heavy bucket for one of the women, taking time to teach rather than command. His concern was not possession but care. The youngest woman noticed the changes first. She smiled at him more openly, laughed at his jokes, and waited for his guidance in ways that felt comfortable rather than forced. The middle woman appreciated his patience and began to share stories of her past, memories she had once kept silent. The oldest woman's trust deepened gradually. She allowed herself moments of closeness that had once seemed impossible. Each connection was different, yet equally strong. One evening, Thomas gathered the women near the fire outside the house. The air was cool, filled with the scent of the fields and the quiet hum of life. He spoke simply from the heart. He thanked them for choosing to stay, for trusting him, and for the life they had created together. The women listened, their faces thoughtful, then responded with words of their own. They spoke of safety, respect, and the home they had found. It was a conversation without fear or obligation, just honesty and recognition of shared commitment. The world outside continued to watch and question. Some continued to disapprove, but their presence on the ranch could no longer be dismissed. Thomas understood that true respect sometimes required standing firm, even when others judged. He never forced anyone to accept their choices, but he lived openly and honestly, showing that trust and partnership could exist even under difficult circumstances. Time brought growth and life to the household. Children were born, symbols of the union they had chosen freely. The ranch became a home, not just a place of work, filled with laughter, lessons, and shared experiences. The women nurtured the children while continuing to work, teach, and guide the ranch. Thomas shared responsibilities equally, never placing burden unfairly, proving that true partnership required effort and commitment from all. Together, they faced challenges. Droughts tested the land, illness tested the household, and occasional visitors tested patience and judgment. But they faced each trial as a team. The women's strength complemented Thomas's experience, and Thomas's guidance supported their abilities. Each problem solved strengthened the bonds between them. By the end of the story, the ranch had transformed. What had started as a simple act of freeing 3 women became a story of partnership, choice, and respect. The women were no longer seen as rescued or protected. They were equals, shaping life alongside Thomas. The family they built was a quiet rebellion against judgment and prejudice, a testament to the power of trust and freedom. The legacy of their life together extended beyond the ranch. It was seen in the land they nurtured, the children they raised, and the respect they earned from those who eventually understood the true nature of their choices. Thomas and the 3 women had built a life based not on obligation or fear, but on freedom, respect, and love chosen willingly. As the sun set over the wide plains, the ranch stood as a symbol of quiet strength. The fences, the animals, and the fields were important, but more important was the family they had created. 4 lives, intertwined not by force or circumstance, but by trust, care, and the deliberate choice to face the world together. In that choice lay their greatest freedom and their deepest strength.